Welcome back to episode 139 of the Guardian Project podcast. I'm your host, Andy, and while I don't have any proof, I'm pretty sure that the creature in Magic that eats the most peanut butter is Magus of the Jar.
Oh, that's really clever. I like that a lot. And I'm your other host, Mike. And lately there's been a lot of buzz going around about the potential banning of a certain 2-mana Goblin Pirate. Turns out it was all blown out of Proportionist.
Dockside Extortionist.
Please listen carefully.
And this is the podcast where we talk about all things Magic the Gathering.
But mostly Commander.
So let's go ahead and just start out with that first topic there. We had the announcement come out this week from the Commander Rules Committee, so the February 2022 update. And the announcement is that there are no rules changes and no card bannings or unbannings. So the announcement says it's a new year and Commander continues to grow in every context. More players, more games, more content, more cards. All of these things are good, but each comes with its challenges. Each applies pressure to the format and to play groups in various ways. And while they will have some articles coming out this season talking about how you can recognize the stress fractures in your group, they decided not to make any changes. So there are several cards which are very popular topics of discussion. Cards like Turgid, God of Fright, Dockside Extortionist, and Thassa's Oracle, but none of them have reached problematic levels of play in their target demographic, which are games governed by a social contract. The Rules Committee feels that all of them can be handled via discussion among players before a game, and that it's not too difficult to draw a line between reasonable and unreasonable uses. For groups where no social contract exists, however, this is more challenging, but building trust via communication continues to be the best tool for players to create enjoyable games. So we did not see Dockside Extortionist. I saw a lot of discussion online about Old Gnawbone that people would like to see that go.
That's
maybe
interesting.
Maybe it's related to somebody who got, destroyed by an Old Gnawbone deck. Apparently it appeared recently on a very popular YouTube channel. So maybe that's it as well. So there was no banning of Thassa's Oracle, which people have been talking about for a long time. Dockside Extortionist, also still here. I'm not upset. I haven't seen any particularly egregious uses of those cards. I also am one of those problematic people that play Thassa's Oracle as a win con for my CEDH deck. So I'd like to change it up anyway. But I can certainly see how people might be getting bored of it. But I'm not sure bored losing a certain way is a reason that I'd want to ban it. But, I only play in the certain groups and channels that I play with. So I am certainly not the expert on all, experiences playing against those cards.
Yeah, I mean, even in our play group, it almost feels like the same way when I used to try to win the game with Torment of Hailfire or Exsanguinate every single game that I played. It's like, it's not the card that's the problem. Just find a new way to win. Go build a different deck or something.
And this is true. And, we expand on that for just a minute. I think we talked about this on the show before, and it's been a really long time. But, at one point, you played a mono black deck with Sidisi Undead Vizier, which is essentially a tutor in the command zone. You would sack Sidisi to itself. And the way that Mike played it for a long time was you grabbed Urborg and Cabal Coffers if you didn't have them, and then you won with a Torment of Hailfire. And while it's great to win that way, it was every time you played, there was no other card you really tutored for.
Nope.
And so we finally, as a group, said, dude, you got to be done with this, or we're going to have to just start playing against tutors. I don't know what else to do. And you immediately said, yep, nope, I get it. But we let you do your thing for like 6 months.
Yeah. It was towards the beginning of when we really started playing Commander together. I only had a few decks, and so everyone let me do my thing for a while. I learned from it, and now. And
we haven't seen Sidisi in years.
We'll bring it back someday. One of these days. All right. Also, we have some changes to the list happening here in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. Some very cool cards being added. Notable like Anointed Procession, where you get to it's a token doubler on a white enchantment for 4. Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker is getting a reprint, which is really cool if you want to combo off with like your Zealous Conscripts type of deal, or if you want to just play a fair Kiki Jiki. I'm sure there's ways to do that too. Sensei's Divining Top is also being printed here, and it's like, oh, that was only an uncommon, but back in the Kamigawa days, it's been reprinted, I think, one time in a Modern Masters set. So it's actually pretty substantial to see this reprinted in set boosters on the list. So very cool to see some of these cards. There are going to be obviously a bunch more adds and subtraction. If you want to look at those, they'll be in the show notes.
Yes. We also have a note to editor. The full Kamagawa Neon Dynasty, including the commander decks, have been fully previewed at this point. But just to note, the commander decks for Kamagawa Neon Dynasty have a note that there is actually a card that was printed 2 times by mistake. So the Upgrades Unleashed deck, which is the red-green deck themed after the modified mechanic. So we're going to cover that today. The announcement says the deck was inadvertently printed with 2 copies of Mossfire Valley instead of an additional basic. Players wanting to play this deck in Commander should swap out that copy of Mossfire Valley for a basic land of their choice. Honestly, what I would like to see, and what I want to talk to one of our LGSs about, because they're very good about things like this, is when they sell that deck, they just make sure they ask if somebody wants a mountain or a forest. Not that people don't have just mountains and forests sitting around, but someone who doesn't crack packs and perhaps only buys singles and precons would, I guess, possibly not have one. And the number of basics I see just tossed in garbage cans and recycling bins or just laying around is just innumerable. So maybe that's how I could see it being handled. You know, if you're selling it at an LGS, just hand someone a forest and a mountain. Pick the one you want.
Yeah, offer them a really good deal on that taiga that's been sitting in the case. Maybe that's
a forest
the land.
And a mountain.
There you go. Also, if you are a patron and you achieved one of our patron tiers of getting either tokens or one of our Guardian Project proxies, just know those have been shipped. They're in the mail. You should be expecting them soon.
Yes. And if you want to support us, you can head to patreon.com/guardianprojectpod and donate for any dollar amount.
And if you're looking for another way to support the podcast, whatever platform you are enjoying the podcast on now, if you could subscribe, rate, review, and leave comments, we would be most appreciative.
And you can find us online at theguardianprojectpodcast.com. We stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/guardianprojectpodcast. Our social media on Twitter is at guardianpod and on Instagram at guardianprojectpodcast. You can find all of our gameplay videos at youtube.com/theguardianproject. And you can email us at guardianprojectpod@gmail.com. Also, quick note, thank you to everybody who has stopped by and followed. We did hit Twitch affiliate on our new account this week, so we're super excited. Our first stream that we're going, our next stream that we have will be officially Twitch affiliate again, so we're going to have some awesome emotes to add to our account. Coyle, what are we talking about this week?
It's one of our favorite episodes to do. Now that Kamigawa Neon Dynasty has been fully previewed, we are going to go through the core set, and we are going to look at some cards that we're going to be adding to our current commander decks. We're going to look at a little bit of a review of some of our favorite commanders and all the new tools that those commanders are getting. And we're going to talk about some brand new decks that we want to build.
I'm just going to scooch past you into the segue. So Kamigawa Neon Dynasty comes with some new mechanics and some returning mechanics, which is really nice to see. There were a lot of folks that were hoping to see the return of some things that we are getting back. The first thing is ninjutsu is returning the ninja mechanic to put a creature into play in exchange for another creature that wasn't blocked. So that's very exciting. And also, enchantment creatures are returning. We saw these during the original Theros block and again during Theros Beyond Death, but now we are seeing them on the flip side of some sagas.
Yeah, so really cool to see the sagas transforming into creatures this time around. A ton of them. It's not just like 2 or 3 cards. We have a lot. The mechanic Channel is also returning with this set. Channel is like it's an alternate. It's not even a casting cost. It's an activatable ability. We're actually getting 23 brand new cards with Channel from this set, and some of them are quite good.
A mechanic I didn't know that I wanted to come back so badly. A mechanic I've never played with. So it's nice to see. Modified is a new keyword or a new term that refers to creatures that are equipped, enchanted, or have counters of any kind on them. Cards with modified give abilities to creatures that are modified, so that's pretty cool. And reconfigure is a new mechanic that allows artifact creatures that are also equipment to attach themselves to other creatures, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, cool way. I think the last time we saw something like a living equipment, it was germs, like living weapons type of thing. So cool way to do it this time with that new mechanic. We also see completed as a new keyword to describe Phyrexian planeswalkers. So we're seeing
Rip are a lovely planeswalker. Tamiyo has become completed.
I consider it re-life, not RIP. It's actually, it's not RIP at all, right? She's not resting at all.
Yeah. It's a very cool card.
Yes.
And I'm happy to see it, and that the Planeswalker isn't gone entirely. At least they're still here.
Yeah. And it's the first time that we see Phyrexian hybrid mana. So not just Phyrexian mana, but a hybrid pip that is also Phyrexian in Tamiyo's casting cost.
Yeah. Completed says the Phyrexian hybrid mana can be paid with either green or blue mana or 2 life. And if you paid life this way, the Planeswalker enters the battlefield with 2 fewer loyalty counters on them. So Tamiyo can enter with 5 if you actually pay the full 5 mana, or enters with 3 if you pay 4 mana and 2 life. And it appears completed is specifically for Planeswalkers. So I would assume some of our friends will be completed in the next few sets.
I can't wait, personally.
I just don't touch Kiora. Like Kiora, I think Kiora is safe because Kiora is another Simic commander. So I assume they're not going to do Tamiyo and then Kiora, but I assume we'll probably get one of each color.
It's possible.
That's my assumption.
We know in the storyline that there's some planeswalkers that are immune to the corruption of Phyrexian oil. But it's only a couple that we know of, and there's no.
I believe they're already on Mirrodin or New Phyrexia or whatever. So.
Yeah, but then there's no reason to believe that Wizards could just go back and say, yeah, they thought they were immune, but then you never know what happened.
Narrator, but they were wrong. And also, vehicles are returning.
Yeah. It's and they're returning really good too. These are like good vehicles. I could build my Odric deck again, Andy, with some good vehicles in there this time.
It's a Jeep thing.
Oh yeah, it sure is.
So let's talk about cards that came out that we plan on putting into decks that we currently play. And if we don't have it for a specific deck, just a card that we really, really like. I'm going to start out with Colossal Sky Turtle. So this is a 6/5 enchantment creature turtle. It has flying and ward 2, and it costs 4 green, green, and blue. So 7 mana for a 6/5 flying ward 2. I mean, it's not horrible. There's probably way better things you can do.
Sure.
But it has 2 different channel abilities. So you can channel for a green and 2 colorless to discard Colossal Sky Turtle to return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So that's a regrowth. Or you can channel for 1 and a blue to discard Colossal Sky Turtle to return target creature to its owner's hand, like Drown in Shapelessness or any kind of like an unsummoned type card for 2 blue. I honestly, I like to run regrowth and unsummoned type effects in my decks anyway, just because I think they're very good cards. Bounce a creature back that is equipped or enchanted with something that's crazy, or a commander that has been significantly buffed and I need to, fog some combat damage. This is a very strong card that I'm modal card that if nothing else, you need a 6/5 flying ward 2 turtle.
Yeah, and especially if you're playing this in a shell like a Salti Reanimator shell or something, you can get a spell by discarding. You get a quote unquote spell. We know it's an activated ability,
right?
By discarding it, and then you can reanimate it later, and you still get the 6/5 flyer with ward 2 or something. I know I had a Yarick the Desecrated deck that would really like something like this, especially since it actually plays Primal Surge, which I think is a pretty big deal for all these cards with channel on there. And Primal Surge is a 10 mana sorcery, 8 green. It says exile the top card of your library. If it's a permanent card, you may put it on the battlefield. And if you do, repeat this process. So a lot of people will build a complete deck around this card, Primal Surge, and include only permanents other than Primal Surge in the deck. And this is a way where you can include permanents that also give you ways to, like you said, bounce, bring stuff back. There's stuff to counter spells. It's really, really cool, all of these channel spells. And I know we're going to talk about a few more channel spells later on.
Yeah, I run a Nakia of the Old Ways deck, which is a Primal Surge deck. So Nakia is a 5/5 that says you can't cast on creatures, but also says when you tap a land for mana, you get to add 1 more mana that land produces. So you're almost doubling your mana. And so in that deck, you're playing a lot of creatures that have activated abilities, like an Ulvenwald Tracker to have creatures fight each other. Manglehorn, when it enters the battlefield, you destroy target artifacts. So your spells are just abilities on creatures. Obviously, Colossal Sky Turtle doesn't fit in the red-green decks.
Sure.
But if you are playing a Primal Surge deck in blue-green, or even more than just blue-green, because there's plenty of decks that would want to play this, these channel cards are a hit.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. So the Wandering Emperor, aka the Wanderer Revealed, is my first card of choice here for a deck that I have. You might already be able to guess where this mono white planeswalker is going, but
is it Juru with eyes open?
It is definitely Juru with eyes open. My only current planeswalker deck that has white planeswalkers in it. So the Wandering Emperor has a really cool keyword on here that I haven't really seen on a planeswalker before. So for 2 white, you get a legendary planeswalker enters with 3 loyalty. And it has flash, so you can cast it at instant speed. But wait a minute, why would you want to cast a planeswalker at instant speed? Because you can't activate its abilities at instant speed. Then next set of text, as long as the Wandering Emperor entered the battlefield this turn, you may activate her loyalty abilities anytime you could cast an instant. So now we have instant speed tricks with planeswalkers. We have 3 activatable abilities. We have a +1 to put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. It gains first strike until end of turn. So really good combat trick there. If someone is blocking something, you could flash this out and use that ability. -1 to create a 2/2 white samurai creature token with vigilance. Great to just have a blocker. Maybe you want to keep up one of your other planeswalkers that's being swung at. And -2 to exile target tapped creature and you gain 2 life. So just a removal spell for a creature that doesn't have vigilance that's coming at you. In my Dejuru deck, Dejuru is a 5 mana legendary creature human warrior 4/3 that has an enter the battlefield effect. When it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for a planeswalker card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. So this is going to be really good because I have some blink spells also inside of this deck. So at instant speed, I can actually blink Jiru, go search for Wandering Emperor, cast Wandering Emperor, and activate her abilities. So I could have 1 card in my hand, just the flicker spell or the blink spell, and be able to do all this in 1 turn. It's very, very cool interaction.
You know what I also learned about the Emperor or the Wandering Emperor, and I guess I didn't realize from the Wanderer that we saw before. It's the only planeswalker that doesn't have a planeswalker type. So like a Tibalt planeswalker is legendary planeswalker Tibalt. The Wanderer is just legendary planeswalker. I had no idea
because the Emperor doesn't have a name in the Kamigawa lore, I believe, and I think that could be why.
I remember reading a portion of the story, and I think that the story, at least when the Wanderer was young, or the Emperor was young, is that they weren't allowed to share their name even with like their closest friends either. So it's wild. Maybe we'll see the Emperor get a planeswalker type in the future, but it's cool to have one that just doesn't have one.
Yeah, agreed.
The card that I think I might be most excited about, and I know it seems really silly, is it's a land. Actually, all the lands in this set are pretty big hits in my book. But Beseiju, we knew was going to come back. The previous iteration of Beseiju made it so that instants and sorceries couldn't be countered if you tapped it and paid 2 life and cast 1. But this Beseiju is Beseiju Who Endures. It's a legendary land again. It comes in untapped, taps for 1 green, but also has channel for 1 and a green. Discard Beseiju Who Endures All, or not endures all, just who endures. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land an opponent controls. That player may search their library for a land with a basic land type, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control, which that last sentence is the case for all the new legendary lands that had come in the set. This is really strong. Having destroy target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land as almost an uncounterable ability, right? So you would need to counter an ability here. You can't actually counterspell this. Makes it so that I would say almost all instances, I'm not going to make up some percentage because I don't know the percentage.
Sure.
But the number of times I play against a Stifle effect is when I'm playing Stifle, no one else does this against me. And I will occasionally throw like Stifle into like one deck just because sometimes it really matters. Even in a non-competitive format, a Stifle effect is great. Or Nimble Obstructionist is pretty great.
Oh, yeah.
Just a flying creature
I love the spell Disallow personally. 3 mana.
Disallow? Yeah. Great. Great. The only thing that I will say here is that I plan on playing this in every deck that I can. It's very good. Unfortunately, it kind of moves a little further into that homogenization territory, where decks start to become really similar, and there isn't much of a downside to playing this card other than you need green.
Right.
It's an all-star though deck, and any deck that plays green, it's very expensive right now. I'm not sure where this will live price-wise, but seeing that it's a card that is referencing a specific place on a specific plane, it might not be the easiest card to reprint.
Well, that's true.
In the future, but right now it's looking like it's coming out the gate around $40. And that is not easy for me to pick up quite a few of them. This would be I hope I open one when I crack some packs.
For sure. I mean, definitely I agree with you. Every green deck that doesn't, for some reason, care about only having basics or something needs to play this, but I don't know if I'm spending $40 on this unless I have like a Titania or a Gitrog monster deck, ones that can take even extra advantage of a card going to your graveyard or something like that. So.
Yeah, I've got Omnath, Locus of Rage, which is a landfall deck that can return and all, so I mean, I have decks that certainly want it. Maybe not every green deck, like my Nakia deck, solid for Nakia because I can't have spells. So this works really well to destroy an artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land that's causing me issues. It works well in Omnath. Maybe it's not a card that absolutely has to go in like Lana's Cryptozoologist because that has blue and I can deal with some of these things with like bounce spells. But there isn't much of a downside in my opinion other than the price tag, and hopefully it comes down for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So Hitsugu Consumes Awe is going to be the first instance of one of these sagas that turns into a creatures that we mentioned before. And it's one that is going to fit particularly well in my Falthus and Jessica Partners deck. And it even fits without having to remove my Obosh companion because it is odd CMC. So Hitsugu Consumes Awe is a mythic, but for 3 mana, for 1 a black and a red, you get a saga which has the first instance of destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. So this is symmetrical, so it will also destroy your own stuff. The second instance is exile all graveyards. Again, symmetrical. That is going to exile your graveyard as well. But really, it's the flip side that we really care about. So once it reaches its 3rd lore counter, we get to flip it into Vessel of the All-Consuming. Vessel of the All-Consuming is a 3/3 enchantment creature ogre shaman with trample. This says whenever Vessel of the All-Consuming deals damage, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever Vessel of the All-Consuming deals damage to a player, if it has dealt 10 or more damage to that player this turn, they lose the game. So in combination with one of my partners, Jessica Thrice Reborn, who's a 3 mana planeswalker, 2 and a red, enters with the number of loyalty counters on it equal to the number of times you've cast a commander from the command zone this game, has this really cool 0 ability to choose target creature until your next turn. If that creature would deal combat damage to one of your opponents, it deals triple that damage to that player instead. So just by pumping Vessel of the All-Consuming by 1 up to 4 power, or having having it swing one time and it itself pumping itself by dealing damage once, getting a +1/+1 counter every turn after that, as long as I can make it unblockable, which I do have plenty of ways in that deck to make things unblockable, swing in with a vessel, triple its power, and be able to kill someone. I think this is also maybe a combo piece with like a Chandra's Ignition or something. If you can get its power to 10, Chandra's Ignition to have it deal at least 10 damage to all of your opponents, and then they would all lose because it doesn't actually say combat damage. Jessica says combat. Vessel of the All-Consuming does not. So there may be some other ways that you could break this card that I haven't thought of.
I like seeing cards that have the alternate lose the game conditions and not alternate win cons. We've started seeing this over the last couple of sets. Like we had that enchantment that if you or the angel is an angel of finality, one of the angels from the Zendikar Rising. If it's dealt damage, you have a certain amount of life over it, target player loses the game. So I think this is something that plays into something that people are not as upset with, right? They don't just lose, they can't interact with it. In some cases, in this instance, it's just one person loses the game. On the first side with the first chapter saying destroy each non-land permanent, mana value 1 or less, this feels very reminiscent to the card that I picked as my favorite card last year, which was Culling Ritual from Strixhaven, which says destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less, and then you get mana for cards that are destroyed, or I guess each permanent that's destroyed that way. I will say that when I play Culling Ritual, in most instances, the two mana value, from what I'm remembering, may not necessarily have mattered as much as the 1 mana value hitting a couple of early creatures, soul rings, and treasures.
Yeah, treasures at 0. Yeah.
So this is a really good way to keep people off of those just small little rocks that provide value. I'm curious to see how this plays out with the actual destroy, each non-land permanent mana value 1 or less, and if it's going to be on par with Culling Ritual, because that card's backbreaking.
Yeah, no, it'll be cool to see. And I guess I do have my being Obosh companion or whatever, I only have like 2 1-mana permanents. I do depend on treasures a lot for my ramp in this deck, so we'll see. Maybe this one will end up being a nombo for me more than it is a combo.
Yeah. My next card that I like a lot is the Reality Chip. So this is a 0/4 legendary artifact creature, equipment jellyfish for 1 and a blue. It says you may look at the top card of your library anytime. As long as the Reality Chip is attached to a creature, you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. And then it has reconfigure for 1 and a blue, so you can attach it to target creature you control or unattach it from a creature only at sorcery speed. While attached, this is not a creature. So if this is attached to a creature, you can play lands and spells from the top of your library.
Yeah.
1, legendary artifact creature equipment jellyfish is just a really cool type line. Like it's really great. 2 mana is super affordable. I think there are decks that I've been looking for. I guess not decks I've been looking for. I've been looking for a way to get card advantage that didn't feel like I was taking out a spell just to put in a different spell, or taking out a land to put in a different spell.
Sure.
For Noyandar Royal Shaper, which is actually not the deck that I'm going to talk about getting the most cards for this year, or at least from this set. But attaching this to one of my enchanted lands and then allowing me to play additional lands and then spells from the top of my library, I think is going to hopefully be a push that deck needs. It's a really slow deck, honestly. I'm looking at changing up the way that it's built, because right now it hasn't been doing a ton other than just wiping boards, and I'm not sure if that's how I want to play it this year. So I'm looking at maybe making a complete overhaul, but I think the Reality Chip belongs. I just think this is such a cool card.
It is a very cool card. It's like the same mana value as a Future Sight, but -1 blue. And Future Sight allows you to look at the top card of your library and play cards from the top of your library. It has an extra ability to exile cards for 3 or 4 generic mana. But I mean, having
Future Sight's actually 5 mana and 3 blue.
Oh, so yeah, so it's the same mana cost, but 1 more blue versus a generic overall. If you have a creature to cast Reality Chip, and then reconfigure Reality Chip onto that creature.
Oh, okay, and reconfigure. Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Okay, you're including the reconfigure.
Yes,
Got it.
But that's a really good point in that the Reality Chip, just casting it, you can still see the top card of your library. You can still manipulate the top card of your library if you have fetch lands or tutors or anything else, even in Evolving Wilds. It kind of helps to see the top card of your library, even if you can't cast stuff from it. So I know I have a Vega the Watcher deck that does play Future Sight in there, and maybe it would be better to actually use Reality Chip instead of Future Sight. And Vega the Watcher is a 2/2 bird spirit for 3, 1 white and a blue that cares about casting things from anywhere else other than your hand. So being able to cast from the top of your library is cool. And yeah, I totally agree. Having a 0/4 blocker that you can see the top card of your library is really good by itself, and then equipping it for 3 in order to do everything else. I do like Ardent Intrepid Archaeologist as ways for all of these equipment artifact creatures to just equip things for free. With Arden's ability at the beginning of combat, you may attach any number of ores and equipment you control to target permanent or player. So if you're looking for ways to get around that reconfigure cost, I do recommend playing some Arden. So mono black has always been pretty difficult to remove enchantments. As in, if you're playing mono black, it's hard to remove enchantments that your opponents have. And we keep getting a little bit here and there, a little bit of enchantment removal in the form of edict type effects. So Invoke Despair is a rare, but is also the promo that comes in the bundles. So if you're getting a bundle, you're going to get an Invoke Despair in there as is. You won't have to open it in any packs. Invoke Despair is a 5 mana sorcery for 1 black. Target opponent sacrifices a creature. If they can't, they lose 2 life. You draw a card. Then you repeat this process for an enchantment and a planeswalker. So again, mono black, I have this on the list for a mono black enchantment removal. Obviously, it only really works if the opponent only has 1 enchantment because they get to choose which ones that they sacrifice. But I like that the upside of this is I don't see a lot of planeswalkers in the games that I play. So
yeah, I don't either.
So oftentimes I'm seeing this card as an opponent's going to have to sacrifice one of their enchantments and creatures, and I'm going to get to draw a card. So that's the way I look at this card. The 5 mana with 4 black pips in it is pretty steep. Maybe you're playing it in a Keurig deck or something, and you only have to pay 1 mana and 8 life for it. Hey, it's a thing. You can do it. That's a lot. But you also saw Debt to the Kami at Common, actually, here in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, doing a similar thing if you're only really looking at the enchantment exile. So for 3 mana, you get an instant for 2 and a black. This is choose 1, target opponent exiles a creature they control, or target opponent exiles an enchantment they control. So cool to see two new cards in enchantment removal in mono black.
Yeah, something that we don't see very often. I have not been a mono black deck player for a long time. Like for the past year, maybe I would say. We got what, Veto? I had Veto, and then I switched over to Jaren. Aside from my very first commander deck, which was before I really knew what I was doing. It's important.
Back then,
I'm happy you all got these cards.
I'd say back then, if someone dropped a rest in peace, you had 0 options. Now you have, I think, 5 options.
Yeah. Other than just taking them out of the game.
Well, that's true. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's talk about Containment Construct, a 2/1 artifact creature construct that costs 2 generic mana. It says whenever you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard. If you do, you may play that card this turn. This is the most combo-y, uncommon that has just got me very, very excited. This works so well in decks that run wheel effects, so cards that have you discard and draw. So I have the Locust God deck that just constantly wants me to discard. The Locust God literally has a draw and discard effect on it. So if you needed to, you can discard a card and draw one and then still play it. Niambi Esteemed Speaker, my awesome legendary deck, discards a legendary card to let me draw 2 cards, so I can discard 1, draw 2, exile it from my graveyard, and then play it for turn if the stars align. I mean, it's not going to take much. It costs 2 colorless.
Right.
It's an early drop that you can kind of sit out there. If it gets removed, it gets removed, and at least that's what gets removed, and it's not my Niambi or whatever legendary creature I have.
True.
This is really great, and if you have a way to make a ton of mana, you might be able to really get a lot going. So I think this is I think we're going to see quite a bit of this card.
Yeah, you're going to see this comboing out
a lot.
I think you might even see this in CEDH, honestly, because there are some cards that like Shrieking Drake and stuff that bounce themselves, and if you have a discard outlet or something, and then you can cast it from exile or whatever, I can see this comboing so easily, on top of what you already said with wheel type decks, where you're discarding your hand and basically just doubling the size of your hand.
With a huge card pool though that we have, it's very easy. Like as more complex cards come out that have lots of text on them, I think a lot of things that might not have been easy to break are just becoming easier to break.
True.
So like when a card comes out and everybody's like, look, we could do this with Dockside, I was like, you can do anything with Dockside. Like it doesn't feel original anymore.
Sure.
I'm not knocking Dockside. It's such a good card. But I think just as it continues, as the card pool continues to grow and we see cards like this, there's just going to be more and more consistent, like, I guess, combo-y plays. That's what I'm thinking we might see.
Yeah. And we're here for it for sure.
100%.
Speaking of combos, how about a combo involving some auras?
Ooh.
So there's a new mono white legendary creature named Light Paws, Emperor's Voice. For 1 and a white, you get a Fox Advisor 2/2 that says whenever an aura enters the battlefield under your control, if you cast it, you may search your library for an aura card with mana value less than or equal to that aura and with a different name than each aura you control. Put that card onto the battlefield attached to Light Paws Emperor's Voice, then shuffle. So this one I immediately looked at. I know I used to have like a Curses deck, and so I was kind of looking at, hey, if I cast Overwhelming Splendor, I can go grab Eldrazi Conscriptions and put it on my Light Paws right away. And Overwhelming Splendor making all of their creatures base power 1/1 with no abilities, and Eldrazi Conscription giving a creature +10/+10 and Annihilator 4. So, just something really, really strong. But at the same time, if I looked at like my Arden and Kodama deck, which is all about putting land auras into play and then like switching them around using Arden's ability, it does kind of, I don't have a ton of creature auras, and it's still kind of unclear to me if Light Paws can actually grab a non-creature aura with its activatable or with its triggered ability. I'm still asking that in some of our judge forums and stuff to try to get an answer there. But at the same time, casting a 3-mana land aura in order to, double the land from one forest or something, I can still go get something like a Blanchwood Armor, which gives +1/+1 for each forest I control, and stick that on Light Paws. If I need to use Arden to switch it back over to Arden or Kodama to make sure I can get in with some commander damage, I have that ability. But I just think there's a ton of combo potential here. And even in mono white, you can have the combo potential, again, with like an Eldrazi Conscriptions or something like that.
Yeah, when you see legendary creatures that cost 2 mana, it kind of, gets my attention. I like having commanders that I can play multiple times throughout the game and not be completely out of mana.
For sure.
Not that I think all low mana commanders are better. I think it's interesting when you've got a 2 mana creature. Hapatra's at 2, Niambi's at 2. There's a lot of creatures that I've played that are at 2. I don't know why. I just want to play with Light Paws with like Boggles type creatures like Core Spirit Dancer, where it gets +2/+2 for each aura attached to it. Whenever you cast an aura, you draw a card. This feels really good. It feels like a deck that I'd want to build. But then I feel like I would build it as a way that it needs to be commander damage, and then I always just feel really bad because I don't want to target somebody.
I mean, you did explain like some other creatures you can do, and you can cast those auras on those other creatures, and then you can make a rule in your head. I am not casting an aura on Light Paws unless I can win with it or something, and cast your auras on your other creatures, and Light Paws has to get all the free ones or something.
Yeah. Let's talk about the legend rule for a minute here.
Okay.
We have a new card that cares about the legend rule. It's been a minute, but we got to see that the legend rule referenced back in Commander Legends on a Sakushima of 1,000 Faces. But we are getting a new card. It is an artifact that costs 3 mana that says the legend rule does not apply to permanents you control. It says each legendary creature you control gets +1/+1, and each non-token creature you control gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with the same name as that creature. So that last text might not matter in Commander unless you're playing with a bunch of the legend rule doesn't apply. Now we have 4 cards that say the legend rule doesn't apply. We had Mirror Gallery, which came out in Betrayers of Kamigawa. So it's just 5 mana. The legend rule doesn't apply. And then we also had Brothers Yamazaki, which doesn't really work in Commander, from Champions of Kamigawa. It's a creature that has Bushido, and it says if there are exactly 2 permanents named Brothers Yamazaki and play, the legend rule doesn't apply. I have played against a Brothers Yamazaki Rule 0 deck where there were 2 Brothers Yamazaki, which was really cool. And then obviously Sakushima of 1,000 Faces, the blue human rogue from Commander Legends. Mirror Gallery, Mirror Box costs 3 mana. It's really great, and it works super well with my Niambi Esteem Speaker, which is a legendary creature deck. Legendary creature decks are just really popular in general. We have Kethis, the Hidden Hand. We have just 5-color legendary creatures. Your humans deck has a lot of just legendary creatures in it.
Yes, it does.
They're just very good. And I think I certainly would like to get a copy of Mirror Box. It's not super expensive. I don't know if it will be, right? You certainly need to be playing a deck that cares about legends here for it to really matter. But I'm playing only legendary creatures, except I think maybe 2. So Mirror Box is a home run. I would like this card in foil.
Yeah, absolutely. I have an Ikra Shidikui and Sakushima of 1,000 Faces partners deck that literally only cares about making as many copies of legendary creatures as possible. So this card fits in pretty well in there. It doesn't particularly win with combat damage. It does win more with life gain than anything else. So I am glad that this it is +1/+1 and not like +1/+0 for each other creature you control with the same name. So that when I have 8 different copies of Ikra Shidiki, their toughness also grows, which is important for gaining life. So excited to see this kind of redundancy in the legendary rule stuff that I can stick in a deck. So we talked about Beseiju already, which was a channel legendary land. So that was green. So we might as well talk about the blue one too, because the blue one's pretty darn good. So Otawara Soaring City is the blue legendary land with channel. And as we know, the channel costs on these legendary lands are reduced by 1 for each legendary creature you control. So this is 3 in a blue. This is discard Otawara Soaring City, return target artifact, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker to its owner's hand. So just by itself, an activatable ability in order to bounce a permanent is really awesome. I personally really like the fact that this doesn't say that an opponent controls, so that you can do it to your own creatures. In my clones deck, and I know I just talked about Ikra and Sakushima, but sometimes it's really effective to be able to bounce your own clone back to your hand if there's something new or better to clone on the battlefield now. So just having another bounce spell as a land, I'm going to stick it in every blue deck.
Yeah, this is another one that works really well in Niambi. Again, the deck that I think is getting the most from this set. I'm running a lot of ETB creatures in that deck. So Azor the Lawbringer, which when it enters, opponents can't cast instants or sorceries during their next turn. It being legendary, so I can discard it to Niambi. It is a home run. And the nice thing is that I do run pretty much only legendary creatures, so I'm assuming in most cases Otawara Soaring City will likely only cost me maybe 2 mana, or potentially just 1 blue to activate. And I do discard cards, so if the channel doesn't matter for me at that point, I can discard it because it's legendary, and I do have ways to return permanents from my graveyard to the battlefield, so I can still reanimate it. It's exactly what I needed for Niambi. Home run. love an unsummoned channel.
Yeah. Now speaking of Niambi, Andy, you keep talking about how many new cards Niambi is getting from this set. Why don't we go ahead and talk about our 2 decks that are getting the most cards from this set?
Yeah, so we usually talk about cards for Noyandar and Shirei, but since we're going to talk about the decks that we got the most out of, it's not Noyandar for me this time. It is Niambi Esteemed Speaker. So I am getting, I believe it's 8 cards, and no, it's 7 cards. We already talked about some of them. So Otawara, the Reality Chip, Mirror Box, and Containment Construct are really good cards that fit multiple decks, but specifically are going into Niambi. But I'm also getting the white legendary land with channel, Iganjo, Seat of the Empire. It taps for a white and its channel ability to discard it for 2 and a white. It deals 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. Costs 1 less for each legendary creature you control. 4 damage is a lot. That's pretty solid. I like that a lot. I'm adding the new Jin Gataxia's Progress Tyrant. I might replace the old one because this one doesn't feel as backbreaking, because the old one makes your opponent's max hand size 0.
Right.
The new one's not great. It says whenever you cast an artifact, instant, or sorcery, you get to copy it, and you can choose new targets for it. And this ability triggers only once each turn. But then it does say whenever an opponent casts an artifact, instant, or sorcery, you counter that, the first one each turn. So it's pretty mean, but it doesn't strip them of their hand. So I'm thinking Jin Gataxias could be a good card to add. The other card that I really like is Tamishi Reality Architect. So it's a 2/3 Moonfolk Wizard for 2 and a blue. It says whenever 1 or more non-creature permanents are returned to hand, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Funny enough, Niambi does return creatures to my hand if I want, and I can gain some life, so they work together. But then it also has pay X and a white to return a land to my hand, and I can return target artifact or enchantment with mana value X or less from my graveyard to the battlefield. So I am running legendary artifacts and legendary enchantments to discard, so I can return a land to my hand and bring a legendary one artifact or enchantment from my graveyard to the battlefield. This couldn't be any more perfect for Niambi. I'm having an issue now where I'm going to have to make cuts of things that I might not want to. And I am really having to look at cards like Baron, Tolarian Archmage, which it's very niche and might not do something at all times for cards that are more value oriented. So I've got my work cut out for me, but these 7 cards that I've got for this deck, it's a lot. Yeah. How about you? You do have a lot for Shirei this set.
So actually 6 new cards for Shirei, just caring about the creatures in Shirei. Obviously we have some really good mono black cards that we can add to any mono black deck. But yeah, 6 brand new cards specifically for Shirei that do some interesting stuff. So Shirei cares about creatures with power 1 or less. When they die at the end step, as long as Shirei's still out, they come back to the battlefield. The first one here is Dockside Chef for 1 black. You get a 1/2. It has activated ability of 1 and a black to sacrifice an artifact or creature to draw a card, which is really cool because it doesn't say sacrifice another artifact or creature, so it can sacrifice itself. Typically, I do like cards that have 0 mana cost to the sacrifice ability, but this is card draw. This is really good, especially if you're trying to build like a budget Shirei deck. I think this card's currently under 50 cents. I can't imagine it's going to go any higher. And it says Dockside in it, so you can just keep talking about Dockside as much as you want, but it's the chef this time. Iron Apprentice is a colorless creature card for 1 generic mana. It's a 0/0, but it enters with a +1/+1 counter, and if it dies, if it had counters on it, you put those cards on a target creature you control. Every single one of these +1/+1 counters would go on Shirei just to try to make Shirei harder and harder to kill. Virus Beetle is a mean Shirei card for 1 and a black. You get a 1/1 artifact creature insect that when it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. There are 2 different builds of Shirei that I have. One of them is Shimin Ray, and one of them is just normal Shirei. This goes in Shimin Ray. I think this puts the count up to like 12 different creatures that have 1 power or less that make your opponents either discard or exile cards from their hand. So Shirei can be very, very mean in instance like that. My actual favorite Shirei card that they printed here, well, no, I'm going to call it my second favorite. My second favorite Shirei card is Searchlight Companion. This is colorless artifact creature drone for 3 generic mana. You get a 1/1 with flying. This says when Searchlight Companion enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token. So anything that can create extra creature tokens for you in a Shera deck are really good, because you make use of sacrifice outlets like Ashnod's Altar and Phyrexian Altar in order to cast giant Torment of Hailfire spells and Exsanguinate spells.
Yes.
Undercity Scrounger was suggested to me, and I just want to talk about it for a second. It's a 3-mana human rogue 1/4. It does fit in the Shera topic, but its ability to tap, create a treasure token, activate only if a creature died this turn is okay. It's something that you definitely would consider for more of a budget Shera build, only because you're only going to get to activate that ability one time, and really you want to focus on death triggers and enter the battlefield triggers with Shera. So you can make use of it, but it's not as good as some of the other cards you can do.
It's less value than
it is
less
value.
You're like driving slowly to Value Town. You haven't arrived at Value Town.
Right. I'm going 100 miles an hour.
Too fast. I'm gonna pull you over.
Takanuma, Abandoned Mire, is another one of those channel lands, but this one is the black one. So for 3 and a black, you get to discard it, mill 3 cards, and then return a creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand. Mill is not typically a Shera sub strategy, but a lot of times you're going to have your whole process interrupted. Cards are going to be stuck in your graveyard, and this is going to be a really good way to get it out. And it's on a land, so you could play it as a land later on and be fine. So now my favorite card, I said the other one was my second favorite, because this is a brand new ruling that I actually learned about today, and that's what makes it so cool. This is another one of those sagas that flips into a creature. So the Long Reach of Night is a 4-mana enchantment saga for 3 and a black that has chapter 1 and 2. Each opponent sacrifices a creature unless they discard a card. Sorry, this is also a mean Shera card, but at least it has the Edict effect on there, so you maybe don't have to discard a card. And then on chapter 3, it transforms into Animus of Night's Reach, which is an enchantment creature spirit 0/4 with menace. It says whenever Animus of Night's Reach attacks, it gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of creature cards in defending player's graveyard. So in the rare instance you're going up against someone that has a graveyard deck, you can use this as to try to just kill them if they have enough creatures and not enough life. But really the benefit here is, as it's 0 power and you kill it while you have Shera out, Shera does say you return the card, not the creature, to the battlefield. So it comes back as the Long Reach of Night and is going to then again force all of your opponents to sack creatures or discard cards.
So cool.
Awesome interactions.
That's what we call tech.
That's right.
In the industry. So now that we've looked at all the cards that we want to add to decks and the decks that have gotten the most out of this set, we obviously have to talk about the commander decks that we want to build. Mm-hmm. I was very surprised that we did not get 3 wedge commanders. We did get a few. We got 3, but we did not get all 5. But one of them that stood out to me the most is Tatsunari Toad Rider. So this is a Salti commander. So that is blue, black, and green. It is a 3/3 human ninja for 2 and a black. It says whenever you cast an enchantment spell, if you don't control a creature named it's a frog. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce this name incorrectly. It's a 3/3 black and green frog creature token that has whenever you cast an enchantment spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And then it also has an activated ability for 1 and then hybrid green or blue, which we haven't seen these 3-color commanders since like Fate Reforged, which is really cool seeing a 3-color commander that has a hybrid activated ability or cost. It says Tatsunari Toad Rider and target frog you control can't be blocked this turn except by creatures of flying or reach. I like this as a Sultai Enchantress deck. So that is an enchantment-based strategy to have your opponents lose 1 life and gain 1 life when you cast enchantment spells. Cards like Whip Silk, Shimmering Wings, and Mourning. There's a whole cycle. You've got Flickering Ward, and is it Crown of... there's some crown of some sorts in red. But essentially they're an enchantment aura that you can play on a creature, and then they have an activated ability to return them to hands. Like Whip Silk, 1 green to give a creature reach. Essentially it can block a creature that had flying. You can pay a green to return it to your hand. Shimmering Wings enchants a creature, gives it flying, and you can pay a blue to return it to its hand. And then there's a black version that's called Mourning. For 1 and a black, you can enchant a creature and give it -2/-0, and then pay 1 black to return it to your hand. So you can play these cards back and forth And as long as the legendary frog is out, your opponents lose a life and you gain a life. So if you can find a way to make a lot of mana, you can just ping your opponents. There's a card called Blood Funnel, which is really, really cool.
Oh, yeah.
It's an enchantment for 1 and a black that says non-creature spells you play cost 2 colorless less to play. And it says whenever you play a non-creature spell, you counter that spell unless you sacrifice a creature. So if you don't have the legendary creature, you cast an enchantment. You're gonna make your legendary creature, and then you can sacrifice it to the Blood Funnel, so your spell is not countered. So essentially, your enchantments are going to cost 2 less, making a lot of enchantments a lot more powerful. Imagine casting a Guardian Project for 2.
Oh, my goodness!
There are so many things you can do with Tatsunari Toad Rider, and I think this is the Enchantress deck that I want. We've talked at length about decks we tore apart, and I did not like my Bant Enchantress, which was Estrid the Masked, and I did not want to build the Voltron version that actually came in that deck as well, Tuvasa. I think I want to build this. And if I were to build a secondary deck, I really like Light Paws, Emperor's Voice that we talked about earlier. I just feel like I would go with a Voltron strategy. So I haven't quite figured that one out, but I'm working on a Tatsunari Toad Rider deck. What would you build?
Well, I want to just real quick. I know you've had a Muldrotha deck from a boxing league. Have you had a different Sultai deck before, or is this going to be your first built Sultai?
I think is my first Sultai.
Oh, it's so exciting. I'm so excited for you.
Yeah, I don't think that I've ever had one. If I look up the top Sultai commanders, I'm not seeing any that I've ever played. Muldrotha, Yarick, Zaxara. I've talked about Tasker. Oh, I guess I had Kadena.
That's
Morph.
Right. That's right.
And I had that for quite a while. But I took it apart and just, sometimes you just get bored with the deck. So I guess it'll be my second official Sultai deck that isn't just from a boxing league. So,
beautiful.
Yeah, cool stuff.
Now, I am not doing anything unique with the deck that I'm building because I went straight into mono black. I was thinking about doing mono black, the Dragon, Junji, the Midnight Sky, or mono red, Atsushi, the Blazing Sky. But when I looked at them, they just became combo decks with reanimation and stuff, which is cool and stuff. And we'll talk about that next week when we talk about combos. But I wanted to get into just some value towns. So Nashi Moon Sage's Scion, which from what I understand is like Tamio's apprentice. Adopted son, is a 3 mana rat ninja for 1 black that has a ninjutsu ability, not commander ninjutsu, which does make this a little tricky. And ninjutsu for 3 and a black, so it actually costs 1 more, but 1 less black pip, and has the ability whenever Nashi Moon Sage Scion deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of each player's library. Until end of turn, you may play one of those cards. If you cast the spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. So this is going to be a mono black deck, actually without tutors. I do have the deck list already. I did build it yesterday. So it has no tutors. So really the card draw and tutoring ability, I'm depending on my opponents to have those in the decks in order to come up with some combo pieces. So the win conditions in this deck are combos, because otherwise it wouldn't have a win condition and it might just dirtle for a long time. There is going to be some things, I'm going to be able to give evasiveness to Nashi to make sure that Nashi can get in for combat damage to activate the ability. So I might as well put in cards like Hatred, 5 mana instant to pay any amount of life and give a creature plus X plus 0 until end of turn to pump Nashi all the way up to 21. We're already going to be sacrificing life with Nashi's ability to cast our opponent's spells. So we're going to put life gain abilities in the deck as well. So that will also be able to offset Hatred, and we'll put Bolas's Citadel. One of my favorite mono black win conditions is Bolas's Citadel, Sensei's Divining Top, and Aetherflux Reservoir. It's cool, but you need all 3 pieces to make it work. And hopefully without being able to tutor for them, we can keep the power level of this deck a little bit lower. But other than that, it's going to be very Gonti like Gonti Lord of Luxury that exiles 4 cards and you get to pick one, but only from 1 player. So this one hopefully will be something similar and something just kind of fun to play in mono black.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that is what we're going to be playing from this set. We're interested to hear from you if you are going to play any of these cards. Let us know, and if there's anything we missed or commanders that you're interested in, please email us or tweet at us. We would love to hear from you. And that is it for this week. Next week we'll be back talking about combos from cards in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. If you want to find us online, you can find me on Twitter at Andy Flory.
And you can find me on Twitter at WormCoilEngine. Of course, we want to give a special thanks to Ryan Nichols, our producer and editor. Thank you for everything that you do. We really appreciate it. And Chris Wolf, who handles all of our graphic design, thank you for everything that you do, and we really appreciate it. And to all of you listeners, we will chat with you next week. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.